Hey guys, Kevin Cleary with a knife video. Today I've got a knife that to me is pretty cool and pretty special because of the fact that I have just been interested in a mini division for so long, okay? I love the division, I love the mini division, I love Brous Blades, okay? I really like Jason's overall design style, and one of the things I think is great about the company is that although there are a lot of different knives, and I'll show some of them to you here in a minute, there are a lot of different knives, but they all somehow carry this Brous flavor, okay? You know, they all say Jason Brous. And I think that's a real achievement, to be able to come up with different and interesting knives that, although they're very different, still carry this distinctive look, this distinctive feel that I think all of Jason's stuff tends to have, certainly including the division. To me, this is a quintessential Brous. Obviously, it's not the first one. The Silent Soldier fixed blade was, I think, his first offering, and it's a great knife, and it's been very popular, and there's a good reason why. The division, I think, is also a great knife and very popular, and I would say that these two knives have a lot to do with the success of Brous Blades in general. You know, if he had come out with the Reloader first, I don't know that people would have been that interested. But the division has been wildly popular, and I know the Silent Soldier has as well. And so those two blades, to me, are quintessential Brous blades. And so I'm really glad to have one and be able to use one. Someday, I think I will get a full-size division. I pulled the trigger on this first, primarily because I wanted something that was a little more practical. Okay, the division is a very large knife, and I don't know how well it would carry, and I certainly would maybe have some questions about, you know, taking it out and using it in public, where this, not so much. Now, you know, I have big knives and I've used them. You know, a few weeks ago I had a Zabo out cutting open my kid's toy from their Happy Meal, and so it's not the end of the world, and really no one cared, okay? But there are times and places where you go, yeah, I don't know if I want to get a knife out that's quite this large. Anyway, so for me, not only the size but also the materials made the mini division just a little more practical and a little more carryable than the full size. So it was a great move, and I've been really happy with it. So overall, you know, if you haven't figured it out, this is definitely going to be a positive review. It's going to be a little longer, okay, because I do have a couple of other Jason Brous blades here with me that I want to show by way of comparison and make some discussion about some of the things I like about Brous blades in general. Okay, so expect that after we get past the size and weight. Before I zoom in and start going over specifics, I'm going to do some comparisons. All right, so you've been fairly warned. Size and weight on this is very good. You know, it's called the mini division, but it's by no means mini, okay? It's not a small knife. 8 and 5/16 overall, so just a little over 8 1/4, and that comes because the blade is 3 1/4 almost exactly, and the handle is just a little over 5 inches. Okay, I didn't, by the way, in those measurements include that the fact the pocket clip kind of extends past the handle, and so does this little lanyard spacer. They do extend past the handle, but I kind of ignored that for measuring purposes. Now, many websites will list this as a 3 1/2 inch blade, and that's accurate, but you see how the handle comes up here past the sharpened edge. So the most, you know, from everything that I've been able to read, in Canada it doesn't matter, but most places that care about blade length, they measure from the highest point on the handle to the tip of the blade, and so that's 3 1/4 inches. It is 3 1/2 inches of cutting edge, and you can kind of see how that, let's see if I kind of show you, you can see how there's handle here coming past where the sharpened edge is, okay? And all of that comes in, so those sizes are, again, 8 and 5/16, 3 1/4, 5 and basically a 1/16 for the handle. And the weight on this is 5.6 ounces, okay? So just over 5.5 ounces, and so for me, that's not a big deal. Now, some of you who, you know, get really caught up in like size per weight, okay, you're going to notice that, hey, that seems a little heavy for its size, and yeah, that's true. There's a lot of knives that are 8 and 8 1/4 inches that are under 5 ounces, but certainly 5.5 ounces, 5.6 ounces is not too heavy to carry. This knife is not bad in pocket. It is a little thick, okay, And so you feel that weight just a little more, if that makes sense to you. You know, I think the last video I posted, I could be wrong, but recently I know I will have put up the zero tolerance 0620 or 0630 video. And that knife, even though it's heavier than this, it doesn't feel as noticeable in pocket because it's, you know, it's almost a full ounce heavier, but it's quite a bit thinner, okay? Now, there are good reasons for that thickness, and I'll talk about those as we get into the handle. But for now, that's the size and weight on this knife. Now let me pull in some comparisons. I do have some other Brous blades here. Generally, by the way, Brous blades are going to be a little heavy for their size, as are many mid-tech and custom and semi-custom knives. So here is the Silent Soldier Flipper. You can see how those two compare. This is previously reviewed and a very, very popular knife as well from Jason Brous. Here I've got the Silent Soldier Fixed Blade. Great, great knife. I've got to say this right now. If you're thinking of a SOG Snarl, save up and get the real thing. It's a night and day difference. I've handled the SOG Snarl a couple of times. I was thinking of picking one up, and every time I've got it in hand, I just cannot get comfortable using it. This immediately fits into your hand. It's comfortable. It's usable right from the get-go. Okay, but there's the Silent Soldier Fixed Blade. You can see it's very small. I've got one more Brous to share with you here before we move on. By the way, I will make a full video. This has not yet been reviewed yet. This is the VR71. I will do a full comparison of these two. I'd like to do a T4, but my T4 has moved on to bigger and better things, I suppose. You can see though that in the handle, close these both down, they're very similar in size, but the VR71 has quite a bit more blade there. And so that's a pretty cool feature. I'm not suggesting that I like one that much better than the other. In fact, I don't know that I do like one better than the other, but just by way of comparison, I know this has been a popular blade as well. And so some of you, maybe you're newer Brous fans and you've picked up a VR71 but don't have a division, and that's how those two compare, okay? Now, I'm gonna get into some of the specifics, and so let's go ahead and zoom in a little. Hopefully we don't have any problems from the remote that we sometimes do. Nope, good job. It's gonna come right in for me. Perfect. Back out just a little to make focusing a little easier. All right, so there it is in close-up. Let's start off with the blade. We normally talk about the blade first, and we're not gonna mess up the order for this video. The blade on this is of course D2 steel. You got 3.5 inches of sharpened edge here, and of course the actual cutting edge also measures 3.5 inches. This handle, as you can see, extends past the cutting edge, so it's a little shorter in that measurement. You've got a big thick piece of D2. You can see Brous Blades. Am I showing it to you the right way? There you go. You can see Brous Blades here written on the back of it and the serial number, which is 617 out of 1,000. This is the stone-washed finish, and I really like the stone-washed finish, although let me go on record as saying I don't mind Jason's satin finish. I actually kind of like his satin finish, even though I know there have been some complaints about it looking essentially like it was done by hand, and that to me kind of adds some character to the knife. Anyway, this is not the satin finish, this is the stone wash. Let me grab that VR71 again and you can see the difference. Okay. The cool thing about this blade is its utility, okay? You have this very thick piece of D2 steel, and yet this thing slices like crazy. The edge geometry is phenomenal, and that is because of the very deep hollow grind that's on this. And I've said before, and you know, I'm not going to harp on this too much, but I really like hollow grinds. In fact, I prefer a hollow grind, especially for an EDC knife, because of the fact that you can have all this great big piece of D2 steel, tons of strength, and yet you can still get it down to a cutting edge that performs really, really well, especially for slicing tasks, okay? So this blade is going to slice extremely well. It's almost all belly, very acute point, so it's going to penetrate well also. And you've got that nice thick piece of steel, so it carries quite a bit of strength even out to the tip. Now, the tip is a little fine, so I wouldn't go jamming this in and trying to, you know, pry on anything, but for any kind of normal task, you're not going to have to worry about breaking the tip or anything like that. All right, so the other thing I want to say that about D2 is you may be looking at this, and I know some people may be put off by the fact that D2 is a semi-stainless steel. I know initially I was until I tried it. I think my first D2 blade was the Benchmade 710. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the first one I had. And I gotta tell you, since that time until now, I probably have had about 10 different knives that had D2 steel. I think right now I have maybe 6 or 7. I've got to tell you, I love D2 steel. In fact, it may be my favorite steel because of this. It almost seems magic in the way that it will take such a ridiculously sharp edge. And I can get D2 to an unbelievable level of sharpness, and it'll hold that level of sharpness for a long time. In my experience, it both sharpens better and holds an edge better than S30V, and yet, and I guess not in yet, that's what makes it so great. It sharpens very easily, and it holds an edge really well. Normally, what happens is a harder steel, is hard to sharpen, but it holds that edge well. Well, here you've got a steel that defies that principle almost, because it's fairly easy to sharpen. I mean, it's not like sharpening your HCR13 Tenacious, but it's generally or overall easy to sharpen, and it holds that edge really, really well. And of course, Jason has said, he uses D2 because he can do a great heat treatment on it, and he can. All of my Brous blades are extremely well done, and maybe that's part of the reason I love this steel so much, is because I've just had it from makers who really know how to work with it. But my experience with D2 has been excellent. I'm really, really impressed with it. Okay, so that's what I'm going to say about the blade. It just performs exceptionally well. It slices well, it cuts well. It's not a chopper, no folding knife really is, but it does, it deals with vegetables really well. And if you ever had to use this in a sort of defensive situation, it's more than adequate for the task. Okay, let's talk about the deployment and lockup next, as we always do. This knife flips out very quickly. Jason Brous is kind of known for making knives that flip exceptionally well, and the Division is no exception. In fact, part of that reputation is built on the Division. It does flip great. It is a ball bearing pivot, and you guys know my feelings on ball bearing pivots. I would kind of like to see that trend wane a little, but for now, it's kind of here to stay, and so we're going to get folding knives with ball bearing pivots, and that's fine. It's not the end of the world. Certainly, I wouldn't not buy a knife because it has a ball bearing pivot, but I certainly don't see it as a determining factor. Okay, I don't see a knife and go, yeah, I'm not that interested, and then all of a sudden you say, oh, it's ball bearing pivot system, and I go, oh yeah, no. In fact, I feel like it could be a drawback depending on how you're planning to use a knife. As an EDC, it's pretty good. But if this was going to be a knife that I was going to take to the bush or anything like that, then I would definitely not be into a ball bearing pivot system. Okay, so lockup and deployment. Deployment is very good. It is primarily, in my mind, a flipper, but it does have this cutout which you can access, as you can see there, and open the blade quite nicely. I rarely or ever, or maybe never, do that. You do sort of have to move your grip, okay? So if you're holding the knife up here, closer to where you're going to hold it when you use it, you kind of have to come down a little so your thumb can get into that cutout, that deployment hole. So for me, it's basically a flipper exclusively. I don't really use that deployment hole, although it is there. And by the way, I've got to say, it looks really cool. It's really neat when a design is able to take a functional part of the design and make it look really awesome. And certainly that's one of the things that this blade does really, really well, is it just looks amazing and functions as good as it looks. It is a liner lock. You can see that the stainless steel liners there are quite thick, and so you've got a very thick liner lock, very, very solid lockup. No blade play in any direction. It's really, really good for that. And that, again, is pretty standard for Jason Brous, to find things that are really, really well done. Okay, so that's no big surprise. So lockup and deployment, yeah. Essentially, it's a liner lock, but it's a very well built liner lock, and it flips extremely, extremely well, as do all Brous blades, at least all the ones I've ever held. I suppose The only one I can't say that for is the fixed blade. All right, now let's move on to the handle. The handle is one of the cool things about this blade because, as I've been saying going through, it looks awesome, right? It's a really cool looking design, and sometimes you get a cool looking design and you kind of wonder, is that going to feel good in hand? This feels really, really comfortable. And as I've said, I put a lot of use on this knife, and so I can attest not only from just holding it, but from actually using this and doing a lot of cutting. It's very, very comfortable. All right, no major issues. Now in a reverse grip, the only drawback, I never really use it this way, there is the drawback of this little lanyard thing here. Essentially it's a spacer for the clip, but in that grip, you're not going to put your thumb on the tip of the knife. It's actually quite sharp, okay? So that's going to be very uncomfortable. You're better off to just do this. So I never use the knife that way, so for me that's not really an issue. But if you're constantly using a reverse grip, I'm not sure why you would be, but maybe that would be an issue for you. What else can I say about the handle? There are a couple little things that I would say about this handle that could maybe be drawbacks. It would be cool if this G10 was just a little bit thinner, okay? Not a lot thinner, because one of the things that the thickness of all Brous blades, all the handles are quite thick on his knives, makes them very, very comfortable. Okay, so you don't want to thin that out too much to the point that it becomes uncomfortable. You could probably shave off 1 millimeter or so on each side. That would thin down the knife, maybe save some weight as well, and make it carry a little better. But it is very comfortable the way it is, and it's nicely milled G10. So you lose, I think, some of that milling and therefore some of that quality or some of that higher end look if you went with a thinner G10 on this. One other thing that this I think would be really cool, and it hasn't happened, and it never will because this knife has been around for some time, but it would be really cool for me. I would really like to see this in a liner lock. I think that would be really cool. Just the same, either this one or the large division. Exact same everything. Don't change anything about the design of the knife. Just do a titanium a titanium frame lock. I said a liner lock. Sorry about that. I meant it'd be cool to see this in a frame lock. I think that would be a really neat option. Anyway, maybe there are challenges to that, and that's why it hasn't happened. Or maybe it just, maybe Jason doesn't feel like there's a demand for that. On the other hand, if it does happen, put me on the list. I would like to own this in a tie frame lock. Let's see, what do we need to talk about as well? Oh yeah, the pocket clip. Pocket clip is really well done. And the way it works is somewhat like the 0562, where this slips in and then you put the screw in and that kind of holds it in place. It's on the opposite side though, okay? On the 0562, the clip is inside of the stainless steel liners. In this version, it's outside. And you can see what he's done here is put this little lanyard hole on, and essentially that becomes a spacer that holds the space where this clip would fit if you wanted to set it up for left-hand carry. All right, so there you go, guys. That's my take on the Brous Blades mini division. Overall, let me just zoom out here and say a couple of things kind of in conclusion. All right, what are you getting with this knife? I think you're getting an extremely functional folding knife. It's very durable, very tough, very reliable. Certainly it's quite high-end and collectible. The price point is high. It's a semi-custom. But what's cool about it is you've got a high-end knife that you can take a lot of pride in, but you can use, okay? You've heard me say this before, and I've gotten rid of knives because I just felt like I couldn't use them. And this is not that way at all. Yes, it's a $300 knife, brand new. I didn't pay that for it, but it's still expensive. But the materials and the finishes and the construction mean that this is a high-end knife that you can really put through its paces without any hesitation, without any worries that you're going to damage it, that you're going to, cause some major issue. It's made, and it's got materials and it's got construction such that you can, this is not just, I've said this about knives before, that this is like a functional piece of artwork. This is a very, very functional piece of artwork, okay? It's beyond cool in its design, in its overall look, in its feel. You know, it's different. It's really, really awesome. But in addition to that, you know, you're also getting something that's super useful, that's super durable, and really carryable. So the reason I like this knife is just because of all those things coming together. You've got a great looking, sort of different, interesting blade that is high-end, that's semi-custom, and yet it has all the usability and all the practicality of, you know, your Tenacious or your Recon 1 or American Lawman or something like that. And so it's just a great marriage of, you know, two parts of the knife industry that often are not together, okay? You know, you either sort of have to focus on a beautiful art knife that's a custom, that's high-end, you're going to put on a shelf, or something you can carry and use every day. But this is really both, okay? And that's why I really, really love it. You lose nothing in terms of functionality, and you gain all this attractive, interesting, designed coolness that come from, you know, a semi-custom or custom knife, but you get one that you can just use every day and not worry about. Okay, so there you go, guys. That's my take, finally. I know I added a little bit there at the end, but that is now my review of the Brous Blades division. Obviously, you've seen I've got some other Brous stuff there coming up for review, so be looking forward to that. And I'll probably pull this out by way of comparison when I get to those other things. We'll talk to you later, guys. Hope you have a great day.